Human suffering is a complex and multi-layered phenomenon that has occupied thinkers throughout history. It manifests in countless forms: anxiety, conflict, loneliness, despair, and much more. Yet, beneath this vast landscape of pain and struggle, it is possible to trace suffering back to a set of core causes. One way to begin understanding suffering is to look at common primal fears that shape human experience. Initially, these can be identified as a broad spectrum of anxieties: fear of death, fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of vulnerability, fear of scarcity, fear of meaninglessness, and so on. From a larger list of fundamental human sufferings, one can distill and group them into overlapping patterns, finding common roots beneath. A thoughtful process reveals that many apparently distinct fears share the same underlying source. For example, fear of death and fear of loss, fear of being abandoned and fear of isolation, or fear of not having enough and fear of worthlessness, often spring from similar places within the psyche and our evolutionary wiring. By asking what each fear arises from and identifying the fundamental anxieties behind them, it becomes clear that these fears can be grouped into three essential root causes: impermanence, the fear of loss, change, and death; separation, the fear of being alone, rejected, or disconnected; emptiness, the fear of meaninglessness, inadequacy, or existential void. Each of these is not merely a psychological state but reflects profound existential conditions of being human. From many sufferings to three roots at first glance, the landscape of human suffering might appear fragmented: fear of failure, fear of abandonment, fear of vulnerability, fear of scarcity, fear of meaninglessness, and others. But by digging deeper, these particular fears can be understood as expressions of three larger categories. For example, the fear of death and fear of scarcity both relate to impermanence, the awareness that things do not last and that loss is inevitable. Fear of abandonment and loneliness link naturally to separation, the feeling of being cut off from others and the world. Fear of meaninglessness or inadequacy reflects emptiness, a deeper anxiety that life or oneself may lack inherent value or purpose. Philosophers and spiritual traditions throughout history have explored these root conditions. Heraclitus, the ancient Greek philosopher, famously said, "Everything flows," highlighting impermanence as the fundamental nature of reality. Buddhism teaches the doctrine of anicca, the impermanence of all phenomena, as a source of suffering when clung to. The human condition of separation has been examined extensively by existentialists like Jean-Paul Sartre and Martin Heidegger, who explored the tension between individual freedom and isolation. Social philosophers emphasize how humans are inherently relational beings, with separation causing feelings of alienation and despair. Finally, the fear of emptiness or meaninglessness is central in the works of Friedrich Nietzsche and Albert Camus, who confronted the challenge of creating meaning in a world without inherent purpose. Impermanence, the fear of loss and change. Impermanence is an inescapable fact. Everything that exists changes, decays, or ends. From birth to death, relationships to material possessions, social status to physical health, all are transient. This fundamental truth can evoke deep fear and anxiety. This fear of impermanence is both biological and cultural. Evolutionarily, organisms are wired to avoid death and harm to ensure survival. Psychologically, humans struggle with the pain of loss and uncertainty. Culturally, many societies foster denial or fear of change, often valuing permanence as security. The consequence of this fear manifests in clinging tightly to people, possessions, identities, or control. It can also fuel conflict, as groups struggle to maintain or protect what is perceived as threatened. On a personal level, this fear leads to anxiety, grief, and resistance to change, limiting the ability to live fully in the present. Philosophy encourages an acceptance of impermanence, not as passive resignation but as a profound insight enabling presence. Recognizing that change is constant can liberate the mind from clinging and open the door to appreciation and aliveness. Separation, the fear of being alone and disconnected. Humans are inherently social creatures. Survival historically depended on connection with others, family, tribe, community. Being isolated could mean danger or death. This biological truth gives rise to a deep-seated fear of separation. This fear extends beyond physical loneliness to emotional and existential dimensions: fear of rejection, not belonging, being misunderstood, or invisible. Social conditioning amplifies this fear by enforcing norms and judgments that pressure conformity and marginalize difference. Separation can generate tribalism, division, and conflict on a societal scale, as groups seek belonging and security within in-groups, often at the expense of out-groups. On a personal level, it can lead to shame, hiding the true self, and feelings of alienation. Philosophical traditions from Stoicism to modern psychology emphasize authenticity, vulnerability, and compassion as antidotes to separation. The realization that true connection begins with self-acceptance can dissolve much of this fear. Emptiness, the fear of meaninglessness and insufficiency even when survival needs and social connection are met. Another fear can arise, that of emptiness or meaninglessness. This existential anxiety reflects awareness of life's uncertainty, finitude, and the absence of inherent meaning. In modern secular contexts especially, where traditional narratives have declined, this fear can become prominent. Individuals may feel lost or hollow, chasing external validation or distractions to fill the void. This fear drives consumerism, addiction, distraction, and burnout. It also fuels existential despair or nihilism. Philosophy offers responses to this challenge. Nietzsche famously declared that in the death of God, meaning must be created by each individual. Existentialists like Camus affirm that meaning is not found but made through engagement with life's struggles. Interplay and amplification. These three root fears do not exist in isolation, they interact and reinforce each other. For example, fear of impermanence can deepen feelings of separation. The loss of a loved one intensifies loneliness. Emptiness can grow when separation persists, or when impermanence threatens all sources of meaning. This interplay fuels many destructive patterns seen in individuals and societies: conflict, alienation, consumerism, anxiety, and despair. Understanding these root fears and their dynamic is essential for meaningful change. By bringing awareness to these fundamental anxieties, it becomes possible to respond with insight rather than reactive fear. The role of philosophy, as a discipline of reflection and inquiry, provides tools to understand and engage with these fears. It challenges assumptions about permanence and selfhood. It offers ethical frameworks to navigate separation and community. It invites creative engagement with meaning and purpose. Moreover, philosophy's great value lies in its capacity to link universal truths with personal transformation, making abstract concepts practical and relevant to daily life. Conclusion: the many forms of human suffering can be traced back to three primal fears: impermanence, separation, and emptiness. These fears have evolutionary, psychological, and cultural roots and shape behavior on personal and collective levels. Facing these fears is not about elimination but about understanding and transforming the relationship to them. Through the wisdom of philosophy, it becomes possible to live more fully, embracing change, authentic connection, and self-created meaning. This exploration reveals that suffering, while universal, is not a fixed destiny. It opens the path toward freedom, presence, and deeper fulfillment.